Cool. So welcome to the Rise of the Super Being podcast. I'm your host, Vanderson Pires, our producer, Scalan Walker. And today we have a very, very, very special guest, Shechog. Is that right?
That's right.
Yes. Oh, we always try to get the right thing. So, guys, don't forget this episode is sponsored by Combat Room Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So if you want to learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, come to see me and my team at www.combatroom.co.nz. So, Shechog, how are you?
I'm well, thank you, and I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you so much for your time. Yeah, it's been really, really cool to meet you in person, and we've been talking a little bit back and forth, with some ideas for the podcast. So yeah, thank you so much. And so I have a massive, massive respect for, for the ones who decide to go to the monastic life, because as we were talking before, I experienced a little bit, what's about it, and I know it's not easy. At the same time, you have this, it's so cool to meet someone who decided to follow this path, the path of self-discovery, the path of peace, and try to help others as well to find peace. So yeah, thank you so much. I really, really admire, massive respect.
Oh, thank you. Likewise, I'm very happy to be here.
So when your journey started, so how did you before used to be a physiotherapist, right?
Yeah, that's right. So after school, I moved to the Big Smoke in Sydney, and having grown up in Australia, and trained as a physio. And I worked for a few years as a physio, but I felt it wasn't quite right. It just wasn't quite what I was after. So then I actually trained in a side discipline, Masters of Public Health, and worked in disadvantaged communities, worked for the Cancer Council, did other things like this, and I just think I wasn't quite fulfilled. But I didn't quite know that, so I was doing all sorts of things, travelling and all the normal things we do as we're growing up in our 20s. Uh-huh. And I remember one day, chatting with a friend, and we were talking about our minds and how sometimes if our minds are sort of disturbed or upset or worried about something, how it's really interesting that if you manage to distract yourself, that mental pain would go away. And I kind of, out of that conversation, thought I'd be really interested to try meditation. So I went along to a class and I really loved it. I didn't realise I was looking for meditation, but I think all along I was. And I went to another class and I eventually moved into the centre, joined a study program, got more involved, and eventually decided to get ordained, but that was quite a few years later. But I've enjoyed everything about becoming a Buddhist nun and practicing Buddhism, because you don't actually have to be a Buddhist nun to practice Buddhism. So you can get a lot out of Buddhism without being ordained. But I made the decision to get ordained.
That's awesome. That's amazing. And who was we were talking before, and I think that's super important to see, the human side as well. Who was the hardest person to tell about your decision when you decide, okay, I'm going to become a Buddhist nun? Who was the hardest person for you to tell this or was an easy decision?
Well, yeah, it's a really good question. I think in general, my experience, and I think a lot of people have the same experiences, are actually your parents. Because I think as much as they love you, they've usually got completely different idea for you than to become an ordained nun or monk. So they handled it really well. But I remember being a bit worried about telling them. And I know they needed some time to process it, definitely. But after that, they got their heads around it. And I think they're very happy, because I think they see that I've got a lot of inner peace and wisdom in the decisions I make. And I think they're not that worried about me, actually. They're happy these days. And I actually love them a lot more now. I'm practicing Buddhism as well, I've got a kinder heart and a more caring attitude as well. So I think they're totally happy these days.
That's awesome. I love what you said, because they said, for us to get, enlightened, we need to getting peace with our parents, so if we manage to get this is the first step.
It's a really good point. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's so interesting because even I mentioned something to you about before. We were talking with they did this research with kids. So went to schools and ask, if would you take something to short your life in order to become famous, and pretty much all the kids said yes. I would take something to short my life in order to be famous. And see someone like yourself who decide to go to completely opposite of the society. It's what the society, the social condition telling us. It's remarkable. Yeah, it's super interesting to see that. Can you tell a little bit about your daily life? So what's your routine?
What is my daily life? Well, yes, it's interesting reflecting on what you said about that research, because it's true, many people's daily life are chasing certain things. One way or another, we're chasing a material well-being, reputation, fame, all of these different things, and we can look into our own life and see what it is we're chasing. And the reason we're chasing it is we think we'll be happier with these things. But in reality, when we get these things, we then start chasing something else. I don't know if you've noticed. That list just doesn't stop. And we're at risk of getting to the end of our life and actually thinking, what have I actually done with my life? I've been really, really busy. I've done a lot of things. But have I actually, do I feel like I've got happier as time went by? Like, is it, rather than fleeting spikes of happiness occasionally, is it actually getting more and more and sustained and longer and getting better throughout my life? And so for me, as a Buddhist nun, my day is actually busier than what people might think. So, in our Mahayana tradition of Buddhism, we do internal development. So it's important we do some meditation and prayers and various practices like that. But actually around that, we're actually a busy working centre, running classes and courses, and there's a whole heap of stuff that goes behind that. Teachers are being trained. Even I continue my training, so part of my week is studying and making sure that I'm a qualified teacher. So actually it's a combination of practical things as well as meditation and reflection, this kind of thing, and a lot of teaching for me as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit, that today those two words, mindfulness and meditation, has been going around, and what has the positive side, of course, but can miss us to some confusion. So what's the purpose of meditation?
Yeah, okay.
Let's start from there.
Yeah, it's a great question.
What should we meditate?
Yeah, okay. I think we can all appreciate that our minds don't always feel good. Like, I mean, sometimes it's really obvious, like we're suffering from strong anxiety or worry, and sometimes maybe depression or sadness, like really clearly unhappy minds. But if you check an average day, it's really interesting to see what is the feeling in our mind most of the day, because it usually goes from various unpleasant states to other unpleasant states. Yeah. So even boredom is it's a small suffering, but it's still an unpleasant state of mind. Stress is, even disliking what we do, it's not a pleasant state of mind. Yeah. And most people's working week consists of quite a bit of not liking what we do, So if we check, most of the time our minds are very, there's unpleasant feelings in there. So main function of meditation is learning, first of all, how to get rid of those unpleasant feelings. And the foundation of that is inner peace. So you can't have inner peace in the mind and unpleasant feelings at the same time. So if you know how to make your mind peaceful, you're free from all of those unpleasant feelings. So the first step is learning simple meditations that basically just stop all the thinking. So that, stop all the thinking, so we're focusing on one object, one meditation object, and to allow some inner peace into the mind. But the greater function of meditation is to learn not only how to get inner peace when our mind is all stirred up, but to prevent our mind getting stirred up in the first place.
That's beautiful.
And so that greater function comes by learning how to think in ways that are way more constructive, beneficial, than we normally do. We normally think in ways that make us neurotic or worried or depressed or unhappy. So it's actually the deeper function is to change our thinking. So that's the purpose of meditation. Did you want me to touch on mindfulness?
Yes,
as well?
please.
Did you mention mindfulness as well?
Course. Yes.
Yeah. So, and whereas mindfulness is related closely to meditation, so mindfulness we need within meditation and outside of meditation. So mindfulness is like a fancy term for just not forgetting things. Okay. So when we meditate, we're trying to meditate on a simple object or an object of meditation. So it's maybe a thought within the mind, and we're trying to hold our mind still on that. And we use mindfulness in order to do that. So, for example, maybe we start our day meditating on love. Okay, so maybe we remember what we appreciate about others, because it's so easy to forget.
Yes.
We just notice all the things that people aren't doing and they aren't doing right. And we can have frustration even towards people close to us. But if we're meditating on love and we make a conscious decision, actually, why is this person in my life? Actually, I really like that they do this. I like that they do that. The mind becomes filled with what's called affectionate love by just remembering what we appreciate about others. And it's not a view. I'm kind of digressing here, but I'm coming back to the point.
That's absolutely.
It's not a view that's not in accordance with reality, but it's what it's doing is training us. Instead of holding on to the negative things, which we're really good at doing, and we don't need training in that. We're learning how to cultivate love and maintain it by remembering what we appreciate about others. So maybe we do this meditation in the morning, and with mindfulness, we're just remembering what we appreciate about our friends and family. And then we consider all the things around us, the food we eat, the place we live, the facilities where we are. And we realize, wow, like through the kindness of so many people, we've benefited. And we're not as independent as we think we are. Like actually we're dependent on so many other people. And so by meditating on a meditation like love, we're remembering this, and there's this real appreciation coming in the mind, and we're trying to hold it with mindfulness. Meditation finishes, and the greater function of mindfulness is out of meditation then to try and remember this same mind. And so when we maybe catch a bus somewhere, we're heading somewhere, instead of just seeing this cardboard cutout bus driver, actually in our heart this appreciation arises. When we get into work, instead of seeing all the things we don't like about the people we work with, maybe we can remember, oh yeah, actually, but they're really good at this and they're really good at that. And so with mindfulness, we're just trying to maintain that continuum of love. So it's got a really important role, mindfulness, because it's easy usually for us to forget the positive things and to remember the negative things. But if we just changed our view and improved our ability to remember things like this, our day would be really different. It would be really different. We would appreciate a lot more about everything.
Yeah, so why do you think we have this, why it's so hard for us to remember the good things and, get more attached to the bad things? Why is that?
It's such a good question. You know what? It's just familiarity. And it's a really good question. And I think, especially in the modern day, we're pulled into a lot of distractions and a lot of external things, and we don't do a lot of reflection on what's going on in our mind and the nature of the thoughts in our mind. So I think what's happening is we're not aware. There's not a lot of self-awareness of the negative thoughts going around in our mind, and they're just continuing like that because we've never realized they're a problem. We've maybe never even seen them there, because we tend to think all the problems are things outside of us. So there's problem people, problem problems in general. Yeah. And so we're always looking out and thinking, this is the problem and that's the problem and this is the problem. And we haven't noticed actually our attitude to both ourselves and to others can be really negative, and it affects everything we do. And so I think it's just familiarity with those negative minds, which is why we need to train and make conscious decisions to change the way we're thinking and get familiar with those. And that's where meditation and mindfulness is so important, because we need both of those tools to do that.
So, Shechog, what's your favorite technique for meditation? So, for the ones that are listening right now or watching us, what's your favorite technique? Because I know has so many, right?
Yeah.
Lots.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so there's loads of different meditations we can do in Buddhism. I think there's one important thing to really understand first, and I think that's to remember that there's always two things going on at one time. There's the external events around us, and then there's our mind, our internal reaction responses. And recognizing that these internal reaction and responses is what actually determines how we feel. It's like a revelation for most people, because everyone thinks actually the way I feel is because this person's done that, or this has happened. But actually it's our response to these things, because the way we feel is a feeling, and that feeling's coming from our mind and the way we're viewing things. So I think for beginners to understand that is great. And then from that, it's just learning very, very simple ways of making their mind peaceful to begin with. So that might be just a simple breathing meditation is usually what we teach as a basic kind of meditation. And then when people have experience of that, it's learning then how to do these other meditations, get states of mind or feelings within their mind that help them deal with all the different problems that are coming into their life. But yeah, starting with simple breathing meditation is usually the way to go.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I love what you said, about the recognition of the feelings, the thoughts. Because if you want to stop it, to have a moment for self-reflection, we're never gonna notice those things going on, those patterns, and they become very strong.
It's so true, and I think people know this in their own experience if they check, because they keep getting into the same patterns in their life, and they keep having the same problems. And if they check, they'll notice that's coming because there's continued ways of thinking about things that aren't constructive, and they're getting themselves into the same problems again and again. So, learning how to recognize them is very important. And I think that's where we need some help as well, because sometimes we know our mind isn't right and we know we're not happy, but we just don't know why. And I think that's where we need instructions to help us even discriminate a positive from a negative mind, because most of the time we don't even know the difference, and we think a positive mind is like putting this lining over something that's really negative, but it's not. It's actually seeing things more clearly, more truly, and learning how to be happy whatever happens. So I think just understanding the difference between a positive and negative mind and what they are is really important.
Yes. Because normally, we wake up and we have so much of those voices and those noises inside of our minds during the whole day long, and so we most of even one of the questions I always make to friends in general, my students as well. When was the last time did you felt peace? You was in peace? It's a hard question, right?
Yeah.
When was the last time you felt in peace? Are you in peace right now?
Yeah. I think that's such a good question to ask people, and for everyone to ask themselves, actually. I think what's really interesting is that what people don't know is just how much they need peace. Because everyone's got a massive to-do list, and peace isn't appearing on there at all. No. So why is peace important? I often explain this at all our beginner courses, but peace is the foundation for any positive feeling in the mind. So unless you've got inner peace, it's impossible to have a good feeling within the mind. So if you know how to cultivate inner peace, then your feelings just get better and better, more blissful, more pure, more happy, actually. But without that inner peace, it doesn't matter what you do, what you try and accomplish in your life. You'll always feel like you're a bit stressed out, or you're worried, or you're just discontent. Peace is so important, but we don't realize it. And I think once we get a taste of it, even in just one meditation, doing one class, we realize I feel better. I somehow feel better. And it's usually because people haven't ever given themselves a chance to be free from all that turbulence in their mind and to know what peace feels like. Because our lives are so busy these days, aren't they? It's like, in the past, maybe in years gone by, maybe people could have had a moment of peace with their cup of tea.
Yeah.
But now there's no chance, is there? Because as soon as they sit down, a device is pulled out or there's some other to-do list that's happening. And so people actually don't get much opportunity to experience inner peace, and they don't know how to cultivate it either. I think that's another point, actually. Left on their own, people can't bear their own minds because their minds are in the nature of turbulence and busyness, and so they'd rather put on the telly or put on music or do anything than be left with their minds simply because their minds aren't peaceful. So
looking for the distraction. Huh?
Totally, because I think when we know our minds aren't feeling good, like I said, we know something's wrong, but we don't know what to do about it. And so we'll go to the fridge, search for happiness in there, or we'll call up a friend, or we'll go out. But left with our own mind, because we don't know what to do with our mind and we don't know how to make it peaceful, we can't bear it in general. So learning how to cultivate a beautiful mind, we're totally happy to just be on our own, even for 10 minutes, and just enjoy that is quite a step forwards for most people.
So true, because I think it's so important to understand what's going on in I'm not my thoughts, right? Or am I my thoughts? Please help me with that.
That is such a good question. Okay, so we do tend to identify with our thoughts, which is the worst thing we can do, because we aren't our thoughts. Our thoughts at the moment have control over us, and our thoughts can be negative towards ourselves and towards others. And if we think we are those thoughts, we're a bit stuck. So again, it's a technique we learn quite early on in our classes, is to learn to observe the thoughts, almost like a scientist, like you're just observing what's in your mind, but you're no longer being pulled in to those thoughts. Just by observing them, they've got less power. But as soon as we follow them, we believe them. And even if they're contradictory, like one day we can think, oh, I love this person. The next day we think, oh, I hate that person. And we believe it both times. There's no wisdom in that mind that doesn't question those thoughts and wonder where they come from. So in essence, we aren't our thoughts. However, our thoughts create our reality. So the self that appears to us is dependent on the thoughts that we have. But the self isn't actually those thoughts. But if we understand that the self that is appearing is dependent on those thoughts, and that we can have a choice about the way we're thinking, then we can start to cultivate thoughts and ways of mind that just naturally the person that is appearing to ourselves is a person we like. So it is quite important to develop a good mind to ourselves. In Buddhism, we understand it's important to view others through kindness and love and a good heart. And a lot of benefit comes from that in our relationships, because there's so much turbulence in our relationships. Relationships are difficult. People don't know how to hold them together these days. Yes. But we also need to understand that we need to be kind to ourselves as well. And so it's important we're viewing ourselves in a realistic way, in a kind way, actually. Then we'll like who we are, and we're actually kinder to others, as well. So it's quite a profound question you ask. Am I my thoughts? And there's a lot to think about with that. But I think we certainly need to understand that we can get a lot of control or we have a lot of choice about how we see ourselves. And I think one of the best things we can do is start to see ourselves in a better way, learn how to do that, and not be like a slave to those thoughts that are uncontrolled and negative.
Because this becomes a massive rumination of the same. And most of the time, if we trying to pay attention on those thoughts, it's just a repetition of the day before, the years, it goes by, and the same thoughts keep coming. And we keep ruminating. Is that right?
That is so true. I think even modern science says that. I think modern science is something like 95% of our thoughts are exactly the same.
Yeah.
We just keep thinking the same thing again and again. And apparently a large proportion of them, something like 80%, are negative. So there's a lot to be said about our thinking and how it can improve, actually.
Yeah. And I think that's what, that's my next question about, how Buddhism, it's a religion of 2,500 years, has been relevant to the world right now.
Yeah, I think it is relevant. I actually think it's what people need. Yeah, there's so much material development in the world, and there's been a lot of benefits from that, definitely. We can't say material development is bad, but what we need to check is whether it's actually resulting in more happiness. So we can do a lot of amazing things we couldn't do before. But are people happier? And I think if you check, you'll discover that they're not.
No.
And actually more and more people are getting anxious and worried and depressed and difficulties in their life. And I think the mind has been neglected, basically. I think people don't know how to really look after themselves. They know how to look after themselves physically. A lot of thought goes into the body and looking after the body, but not the mind. And the mind is the interface through which we experience everything. Like, based on the state of our mind, if we're grumpy or miserable, our day, not so good. But if our mind is sort of light and joyous, we have a joyful day. But we don't put any effort into working out, well, what's causing the grumpiness and what makes my mind feel good? Well, not internally. We think it's getting everything right outside of us, but it's not. It's working with our mind, changing our mind. That's the answer.
And the ripple effect as well this can create, because if I'm grumpy, if I'm angry, I'm gonna reflect that around me, and I'm gonna make someone grumpy and angry as well, and those things just keep going.
It's so true. Yeah, I know in Buddha's teachings he talks about, he gives this analogy of a magic crystal, and in scriptures, this magic crystal can purify the most impure water or whatever. And what we need to understand is our mind is like that as well. So if we are able to change our mind, if we're able to develop a beautiful mind, it actually influences positively everyone else around us. But when our mind is grumpy and negative, we'll just have problems with everyone, everything affecting us, but mostly coming because of what we're adding rather than improving our mind and bringing something beneficial and good into the situation. We're just lugging along our old habits, our old ways of thinking, and having the same results again and again. So, I think changing our mind, learning how to change from that negative to positive mind, very vital for everyone.
And I think the moment we are living right now, the necessity of those tools, it's becoming more and more important, and even have those conversations right now. It's something. It's the first step towards some change.
Yeah, you mean just talking more about the nature of the mind and people's difficulties that they're having. It's so true, isn't it? Like, I think it's really hard for people to acknowledge that they're not as happy as they want to be. But yet, if we check, most people aren't as happy as they want to be, because how happy do people want to be? They want to feel good all the time. It's not like you think, actually, I just want to feel good, half the time. Yeah. Well, actually, that would be an improvement, to be honest. But it's not like you get that and then you think, I'd actually rather be miserable and grumpy again. Yeah. Like, actually, we want to feel good all the time. But it's actually hard for people to acknowledge that they don't feel good. And I think it's worse these days because of social media. Because everyone on social media most of the time looks happy. They've got perfect situation, all these happy photos, and it's so easy for people to think it's just my life that's not as good as I wanted it to be, and they think it's a unique problem. But Buddha actually explained, unless we can make our mind peaceful, which allows all those positive feelings to come in more and more and more and more often, unless we can do that, no one is as happy as they want to be. No one. He said there's no exceptions. And so when you stop to check who is actually working with their mind, you realize actually virtually no one is. And everyone's suffering, struggling more than they want to, actually. So, yeah, I agree. I think a dialogue, I think chatting about these things is really important for people, and to realize that they're not alone.
But at the same time, we cannot ignore the fact of those things demand some work, right? It's not, it's not just read a book or just listen to the podcast right now. No. We need to do some work, put some time to train the mind.
Yeah, that's true. But it doesn't have to be onerous. So I think we do need to put some time in. But when you consider how much time, for example, like I said before, we put into looking after our body or looking after all the other affairs of our life, to look after our mind, we're only talking a small amount of time each day. Like, meditation doesn't have to be for hours. In fact, we normally recommend 10 or 15 minutes, because in reality, that's the most people can do. Even 5 minutes is amazing. But we do need some instruction, because left to our own devices, like just trying to do a meditation on your own without knowing what to do is setting yourself up for failure. It's one of the problems beginners have, is they don't know actually how to meditate and what they're trying to accomplish. If you don't know those two things, you won't get any benefit out of it. But if you do, and if you've got clear instructions, then you can develop your practice. But you do want to put a bit of regular time in. The best way to view it, I think the way to put regular time in, and the best way to view that, is to not see it as another thing on your to-do list, but to see it as like a mini holiday in your day. Like, actually, I'm going to have a little mini holiday for 15 minutes. Or even maybe it's just 5 minutes, or 1 minute at our computer, just thinking I need some inner peace right now. I think the best way to view it is as a break and an opportunity to have some peace and freedom from all the busyness in the mind. And then that's something that we want to do rather than feel like we have to do.
Shechog, you run lots of different courses and also topics about overcoming anxiety, fear, dealing with loss and change. Can you talk a little bit about those courses?
Yeah, we have loads of different courses offering different things to different people. And the beauty of those courses is they give a real introduction to why we're having problems in one area of our life and where we can improve, how we can change our view to improve. And I think anxiety, fear, worry, those courses are super popular. And we always help people develop sort of a few key tools in those courses, like learning how to calm the mind when we're sort of really worried about things is a really important tool. But then learning why the mind is getting worried and anxious in the first place is a deeper level understanding, which we begin to go through at those courses, encouraging people to learn why they're getting anxious in the first place. Because we need to address that root cause in order to be able to avoid feeling that way going forwards. Yeah, so we have those sort of courses. We have courses, on loss and change, which we did one recently, and everyone is affected by that, and most people don't know how to deal with loss and change because it's easy for us to think everything should be the same, well, especially when we're liking it, and learning how to cultivate more wisdom helps, because everything's changing in every moment. Nothing stays still for a moment. If we did a sped up video of everything, the nature of how things are is movement. But we grasp at permanence, and we lack that wisdom sometimes. Well, not sometimes, a lot of the time. And it takes us by surprise when things change. And in Buddhism, it's about seeing things as they truly are, like understanding things are the nature of change and approaching everything through those lenses. And it's really helpful because, for example, meditation on death is a common meditation we do in Buddhism. Like we don't do it like weekly or anything at our classes, but it's a really important meditation to do because it makes us remember we're not here forever. We're not a permanent fixture.
Yeah.
And we forget that. And, it's principally through forgetting that we take people for granted.
Yeah.
We have difficulties with others. If we remembered actually everything's impermanent, everything changes, then the way we would relate to people, very, very different. If we could remember that all the time. So, so for example, on a course looking at loss and change, we would look a little bit at that. There's so many different topics we do, and we cover lots of different things. And depending on those topics, we'll look at different ways of addressing them. But always trying to understand the root cause. We're always trying to go a little bit deeper. It's not just about inner peace, stopping the thoughts by meditating on the breath, for example. That's always the starting point, but actually what we're trying to always do is understand why things are a problem in the first place, trying to get more wisdom into the way we view everything.
And normally, what's the problem in the first place for the majority of people?
Oh, that is such a good question. Okay. Well, you can probably boil down the problems, even though they have different manifestations, into 3 types. So problems arising from anger, problems arising from attachment, and problems arising from ignorance. So, for example, problems arising from attachment. So attachment is where we look at something outside of ourselves and we think, I need that to make me happy. So isn't that a massive problem?
Yes.
It's because everyone is thinking, I need this to make me happy. And what does that do right now? As soon as we have that thought, I need this to be happy. For example, I need the end of the week to come for me to be happy. What happens now? We suffer between now and the end of the week. So that thought, I need this to be happy, whether it's the end of the week, whether it's a type of relationship, whether it's a job, a position, whether it's attachment to our reputation and what people are thinking about us, which is a massive attachment. People are so worried about what people think about them. The more attachment we have in general, it's leading constantly to these problems. So we're always addressing attachment one way or another in our classes and learning to find freedom from the attachment. And that means not freedom from the thing, not from the object, the person, the position, the money, whatever it is, but freedom from that mind that thinks, I need this in order to be happy. And when we free ourselves from the mind, we start to have a healthy relationship with that object. So the less attachment we have for people, for example, it actually allows pure love to grow instead of this needy attachment where we become dependent on others or feel possessive over them. That's coming through attachment. But when we learn to free ourselves from the attachment, we can still have people in our life, but we just relate to them in a healthy way out of love. And it's beautiful. It actually enables the relationship to grow a lot better. So attachment's a massive problem. Anger is also a massive problem. And anger is an interesting one because I think we're aware of our stronger forms of anger, like when we really dislike people, we can be aware of that already. But what we don't realise is that anger and its manifestations afflict the mind for most people many, many times in a day. Because minor forms of anger, so anger's like outright anger would be like strong anger, rage, that kind of thing. But minor forms of anger are like just small dislikes for things. So, for example, just not wanting to get up in the morning. There's resistance in the mind, isn't there?
Yes.
I don't want to do this. I don't like this. So that's a mild form of anger. And when you consider a working day, for many people, even if you love your job, you often don't want to go. and so there'll be resistance. So there'll be resistance coming up when we get out of bed. There'll be resistance going into work, thinking, I don't want to do this. When we're at work, we think, I don't especially want to do that. And with that person. There's resistance to a lot of things throughout our day. And it's actually mild form of anger. It's like irritation or rejection in our mind. And what it serves to do is to make us miserable throughout the day. And so it's, from a Buddhist point of view, it's one of the main causes of depression. We're just not liking anything. We're frustrated with everything. And it's a problem for everyone. Whenever I give classes on anger, and I say this class is about anger, majority of people at the start think, this is not going to be that relevant to me. I don't really have a problem with anger. But by the end of the class, most people are thinking, I'm frustrated at most things. Yeah. I don't like half the people I encounter. I don't like half the things I have to do. And there's this mental pain coming up every time. Every time we have to do anything that we don't want to do, mental pain, when we have to cook or when we have to clean, when we have to wait in traffic, mental pain coming up. And so that's why so many people's lives are actually quite miserable, because of this mind of anger coming up.
Wow, that's so powerful. And of course, the compound effect this gonna create, this creates.
You mean the compounded effects over time?
Yeah, the anger, constantly those mind forms of anger, it's constantly just adding up.
Totally, yeah, totally. And it's making people stressed out, frustrated, and just miserable in their lives. So learning to identify that, to just notice that we've got it and think, hold on, that's a problem. Yeah, it's a big step forward in changing our life, changing our mind.
That's so powerful. I love that. And what's the third one? Ignorance.
Oh, ignorance. Yes. Okay. Yeah, ignorance. Ignorance is just not having that wisdom that understands how things exist. So in Buddhism, we understand how we're seeing ourselves and others. So I touched on it a little earlier. How we see ourselves and others and the things around us is dependent on the thoughts that are creating that reality for us. And we have ignorance as to how our mind is doing this and how phenomena actually exist, because we think everything is so separate from the mind and the way we see people is the way people exist. But actually, if we check, we can view people in different ways depending on our mind. And so when we understand the deeper involvement our mind has with everything, we can start to change everything for the better, just choosing a view that is more beneficial. We understand that things aren't quite as set and as solid as we think they are. We can start to change things in dependence upon how we want things to change. So there's a lot of power that comes from the mind. But at the moment, that power is untapped. And our mind is controlling us rather than us doing it the other way around. So, yeah, so that ignorance is actually a problem within both attachment and anger as well. It's the underlying problem of both attachment and anger. But it's more profound and more difficult to understand to begin with.
So we start with the attachment, going to the anger, and the consequence, the ignorance, it's gonna tied everything up, huh?
Yeah. If we start to get on top of them, everything improves, because other minds come from these. For example, jealousy is a mind that hurts. Like if we've got jealousy towards someone or about something, it's not like we can say, yeah, I'm having a great day today. It's like, it doesn't feel good to be like jealous towards someone. But jealousy is actually coming from attachment. So if we've got strong attachment to money and we believe that money will make us happy, then if someone else gets a better paid job than us, immediately we're affected with jealousy. But that jealousy is coming because we're actually attached to money, believing that it will solve all of our problems. And from a Buddhist point of view, we would never say material things aren't important, because everyone needs somewhere to live. We need basic conditions, don't we? And we need relationships. We need all sorts of things. We would never say those things don't matter, but none of them from their own side can make us happy. We can have loads of money and be utterly miserable, and there's probably lots of people like that can validate that point.
Shechog, what's happiness?
What is happiness? That's a great question.
What is happiness?
Yeah, what is happiness? Well, from a Buddhist point of view, we would understand happiness is a feeling in the mind, and it's always a pleasant feeling. So it's compared to suffering. So suffering is always unpleasant feelings. Happiness is pleasant feelings. But we can understand that pleasant feelings, there's different types, isn't there? And so sometimes there are like really warm, affectionate feelings we might have for others. So we would say that's happiness arising from affectionate love. Other times those pleasant feelings might be the nature of just utter inner peace and contentment, not wanting for anything. It's like we're just happy with or without. And so that's a form of happiness as well. So in Buddhism we would say happiness, they're always pleasant feelings. Those pleasant feelings have a different character to them, but they always need inner peace as the foundation. So we're quite clear in Buddhism what happiness is. There's no kind of question mark about it. That's how we define it. Yeah. And we teach methods to accomplish that and to free ourselves from suffering, which is unpleasant feelings in the mind. So when you check stress, anger, depression, or all of the feelings, emotions that we would consider are unhappy emotions, they're all unpleasant feelings in the mind. So they're all coming from different types of thinking, and pleasant, positive feelings are coming from positive ways of thinking. There's a clear relationship. I actually think it's one of the kindest things Buddha explained, actually, is that relationship between our thinking, unpleasant feelings, thinking, positive feelings, and how to develop both.
That's so beautiful, so powerful. Talking about the Buddha, what's the most powerful story for you of him, or listen?
From Buddha. Yeah. Well, I'm biased, but I love all of Buddha's teachings. But to be honest, the most powerful story for me would be his life story. Because Buddha was a prince, and he had every imaginable the riches you could have at that time, in that era. But he realized it wasn't the answer to happiness. So he explored different ways. From a conventional point of view, he explored different ways to find happiness and cultivated happy states of mind, understood his own mind. And his parents weren't that happy that he wanted to go off and become a monk. But in the end, he said to them, look, if you can prevent me through the way you're approaching life and everything you've got, if you can prevent me from suffering, then I'll stay in the palace. But they couldn't guarantee that for him. So he said, I'm off, And he discovered through his own experience how to cultivate a positive mind, and then helped loads and loads of people, and all the stories he has working with different people are inspiring for everyone. You know, he would work with people who had massive massive anger problems, you know. But through his ability to explain what their problem was, he was able to help them. He worked with people who were suffering hugely through loss, losing someone close to them, you know, which is one of the biggest sufferings that we face in this life, actually. And he showed them how to develop, how to pull themselves out of that way. I think his life story is beautiful. And so, yeah, for me, I think his life story, it's his life story that is my favourite Buddhist story.
That's awesome. That's super cool. And when was the recognition you have of being in peace? And you just decide, okay, that's my path. That's what I'm gonna go for.
Yeah. Well,
Do you have this memory?
to be honest, it was sort of gradual. Like it wasn't like a revelation one day. I think it was just a slow progression towards it. Just realizing you can't have too much inner peace, believe it or not. There's virtually nothing else you can say that about. Buddha actually said that. Choose anything else, anything, food, entertainment. He said the more you have of it, eventually you'll be sick. Like to begin with, it's enjoyable, but we reach a point where we think, I don't want that anymore. He said it's true about everything external. There's no exceptions to it. Let me know if you can think of an exception, but there isn't.
Yeah, no way.
And the only thing you can never have too much of is inner peace. The more and more you have, the happier and happier you feel. So I think just through my experience, it was just discovering, actually, I just feel better and better and better and happier. Life has more meaning when I know how to be happy and how to help others. So I think it was just like a slow progression. And then I just reached a point where I thought, actually, I think I want to dedicate my life to helping others and helping Buddhism flourish and giving people the opportunity to come to classes and learn how to change their minds.
That's awesome. Shechog, can you please explain a little bit about the style of Buddhism you practice? So it's Kadampa.
Yeah, Kadampa Buddhism.
Kadampa Buddhism.
Yeah. So Kadampa Buddhism is a special presentation of Buddha's teachings. So Ka refers to Buddhist teachings, and Dam, the next part of the word, refers to Atisha's special presentation. So Atisha is one of our lineage gurus in our tradition, and Pa means a practitioner of that. So Atisha's very special presentation of Buddha's teachings made them very, very simple to practice because Buddha gave 84,000. And so 84,000 is quite a lot to get your head around. Yeah. But he was able to condense them into 21 key meditations. And those 21 key meditations form a part of a process of meditation that we do regularly. So someone practicing Kadampa Buddhism eventually would understand how to do all of those 21 meditations, and they might meditate on one per day and just cycle through them on a 3-week process. Or they might do one meditation for 1 week and do a 21-week process. But by doing those 21 meditations, you then naturally understand all of the other teachings. So if you hear any teaching of Buddha, you can slot it. It's like this filing system that makes Buddha's teachings easy to understand and practice. And it makes it very practical. And many of those meditations are ones that come up regularly at our classes. So many meditations are on love, compassion, or impermanence, death, or precious human life. Beautiful meditations to just be doing daily.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting you said about meditation about death, because my first retreat was the
Topic.
Yeah, that was the topic. So for me it was, wow, okay, I'm gonna do my 10 days of silence, doing fasting, and I'm gonna be here sitting and think about death.
That's hilarious.
But that was so the power, how liberating it's that. It's unbelievable.
It's
Sounds depressing for someone who is gonna judge for the sound of, but it's so liberating. It was very, very powerful.
It's really true. So I think for people who haven't thought about it, would think that must be depressing or morbid. Why would you want to think about that?
Yeah.
But the purpose of meditating on death is to realize we don't know how long we've got in this particular life. In reality, we're not relating to our life in that way. We do understand intellectually one day we're going to die, but it always feels like a long way away. And we can get to the end of our life and not really realize it's something special. Whereas if you learn the meditation on death, which is bringing death into the reality now, realizing I don't know when I could die even today. It frees us from all those worries, concerns, basically the attachments that keep us locked into our very ordinary way of relating to things. It makes us see maybe there's something more beyond what I can just do today, because if today was my last day, how would I relate to everyone? I'd relate to everyone so differently. And I wouldn't be worried about amassing a massive amount of money. I'd be actually thinking, I want to put my time into what really matters, caring for others, having good relationships. It helps us cut out many of those things that worry us or are driving us that don't actually bring much benefit. If you talk to people at the end of their life, research shows that they would do a lot of things differently if they could go back in time. But what the death meditation is helping us do is develop that realization now rather than at the end of our life. And through that, living our life in a much more meaningful way, getting the most out of our life. We tend to take so much for granted about how our life is at the moment, and we get stuck on doing things in a certain way. But when we realize, actually, I just don't know how long I've got, everything changes. There's so much more meaning. And this is the case even with people who have near-death experiences, very similar for them. Something changes. They realize, hold on, I'm not going to be here forever. I'm not a permanent fixture. Let's make a difference to myself and others. And so life really changes if we remember that we're mortal. We remember our mortality.
Yeah, because we carry this. It's almost an arrogance of I do have time. I do tomorrow. I do next week. And we have this arrogance. Think we know we have this time, and this is not the truth. Huh?
Absolutely, it's not. We don't know how long we've got, and as Buddha explained, like this life in reality is just like a flash of lightning. It's really, really quick before we know, like moving from one dream to the next, next life arises according to Buddhism. But there's special opportunities we've got in this life we may not realize. And if we take them for granted, we'll get to the end of our life and we'll look back and we'll think, well, what was that? What was that? Because most of us are thinking that till this point in time. We're looking back and thinking, what was that? What have I done till now? When is my life going to kind of start? When is the life I wanted going to start? We don't want to be thinking that at the end of our life. Much better thinking that now. But we can only do that if we really meditate on it, because understanding that we're going to die is not profound. Everyone knows that, but it doesn't change anything about anyone's life. It's only by meditating on it that it moves our heart and we really realize, actually, this applies to me right now. But you'll only get that experience through meditation. You won't get it by just reading the fact in a book.
Yeah. That's so true. And another thing as well, it's the research shows we time for us passed too fast, but because we lost that sense of novelty, it's kind of someone said that, I don't remember exactly who was the person, but we see life once as a child, the rest becomes a memory. So the amount of life we are losing because we are not present.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, no, that is true, actually. Most of the time, our minds are in the future or in the past, and very often we're not relating to what's going on right now. That is true. It does make for a very busy life, or at least a busy mind, always thinking, worrying about what's coming up, thinking about the past, worrying about what's happened, or being depressed about what's been lost. Yeah, and meanwhile, life just goes by and we actually aren't living it. It's like, where was actually the presence and the relating to things in the moment? It isn't there most of the time, is it?
Yeah, it's missing. So, Chichong, what's the, for someone now listen to us, busy, stress, with lots of anger, what I believe it's the majority. What's your advice? What's your piece of course, you already gave us so much already, but
Sure.
just a summary of everything, you've been practicing, you've been studying to help someone out there.
Good question. I think it's that everyone can develop a more happy mind. There's no exceptions, but it depends on our wish. And when I say everyone can develop a happy mind, I mean through meditation and mindfulness. I don't believe we can develop a happy mind, not all the time, not pleasant, good feelings all the time, through chasing external things. So everyone can do it, but it does depend on meditation. But it doesn't have to be very much. You just need to learn a little bit, just the basics, just learning how to calm our mind to begin with. And understanding that calm mind, what's going on internally, matters more than what's going on externally. Because we can get control over what's going on internally. We can't control everything and anyone around us. But if we can learn to control our mind and learn to keep it in a good place, then our life starts to sort itself out. It's like by solving the actual problem, because what's making us miserable is our mind. Solving that, many of the external things in our life start to improve, just change naturally. So I'd encourage people, if you've got the smallest wish, to try meditation. And of course, there's many different apps and things we can do it on these days, but in reality, you get a lot more out of a class and receiving instruction from someone, because there's a lot to meditate on and we don't know how. And in reality, we often meditate better, especially to begin with, in a group setting. When there's other people meditating with us, because we're so distractible on our own. Leave us to meditate at home, and literally we're looking at our phone halfway through the meditation, where we've forgotten we're meditating. We make a cup of tea. So I would encourage people to try a little bit and to realize it's for everyone, and everyone can benefit and everyone's life can improve. And it's not about changing our life externally. So we can continue doing everything that we normally do in our life, but we just do it with a much better mind and in a much better way. And it's open to everyone. Everyone can benefit. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I love what you said, because normally when you talk about mindfulness and meditation to people, I know my mind is so busy, I can't concentrate. We hear that quite a lot. Huh?
Yeah, it's true. And everyone's mind starts like that. So we need to recognize we're not going to be able to meditate after one go. But I tell you what's great to know is that we only need a moment of inner peace to feel better. So even if we do a terrible meditation, but we've only had like a few moments, we'll actually discover we feel better afterwards. I think one of the keys to learning meditation is not to have high expectations, actually to just expect. There's going to be a lot of thoughts, but just to enjoy it, because even by trying to meditate, the mind's becoming slower. It is becoming more peaceful. It's just that we're noticing what's in it for the first time. So it seems really busy, but in fact, it's actually way less busy because we're just looking inwards. While we're always looking out, what's going on here? What's happening next? Mind's actually getting more and more busy, but we're not noticing because we're looking out. So just that process of looking inwards slows the mind down. And we will discover, even if it's just for a few moments, we can hold our mind still to begin with. And we'll discover we feel better, even from that small experience. And then it's just a matter of training. It's like anything. Like, unfortunately, some people think that to meditate, you either can do it or you can't. But it's like everything. We just get better with practice.
It's training.
Yeah.
Just a training.
Yeah, that's right.
Can I show you something? I have a device here to explain meditation. I want your opinion about it. So that's the meditation jar.
I love it.
So, this we talk, this all the thoughts and all that stress, so the meditation is when we gonna try to sit still and let all those things, because naturally they're gonna settle down between this massive storm of thinking. So see what's happened, or if you can watch, or if you watch it from now, you can see the thoughts. That's meditation, right?
That's a perfect analogy. At our kids' classes, we teach various topics, but whenever we're teaching inner peace, we often get kids to make jars with glitter in them, exactly like that, to help them understand the role of meditation. So I love your meditation jar.
So Shechog, thank you so much. So please, give me more information about, for the ones that are listening and would like to learn more from you, to be part of your courses. Please give us some. How can we find out more about your teachings?
Yeah, okay, yes. So our centre is Kadampa Meditation Centre, Wellington, and we're based in Island Bay, but we hold classes all around Wellington and in Lower Hutt as well as Kapiti. So we hold classes outside our premises as well to make it easy for people. And people can just find us by looking up meditateinwellington.org.
That's awesome.
And there we are.
Thank you so much. I learned so much, and I love what you said about the mild forms of anger. I think that's such a massive piece of wisdom for us to notice and to pay attention now. Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and for sure you're gonna see me in one of your courses in the future. Yeah.
Thank you, Vanderson. It's been a delight to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.